to the Shelter Hole. We've got a guest by the name of Jason Hubbard. You guys have seen him before on the Fortitude podcast. We're going down a little different direction today, but before we get started, let me give a quick shout out to Pale Horse Coffee. This episode is sponsored by Pale Horse Coffee. Country first, coffee second. Visit palehorse.com and use promo code 4Runner at checkout in order to get your 15% off your order. Pale Horse is a veteran-owned and operated business, so if you would, please go by there, visit them online. Great guys. They allow us to shoot podcasts and stuff there. Chad had his book signing there, so if you would, please go to palehorse.com and use promo code 4Runner for your 15% off at checkout. Also, the man himself who's sitting here, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Jason and the Cremoso Cheesecake Truck or Company, and thank him for his involvement with us and what he does to help us. I mean, he does a lot to he does a lot to help us. You know, me and what nobody sees and advising and talking. We're all the time running him down at different locations and grabbing cheesecake. Chad was able to visit Jason actually in your kitchen not too long ago. He drove all the way over there to pick up your cheesecakes. I'm telling you, people, if y'all have not checked out Cremoso Cheesecake Company on Facebook, Instagram, go there, like it, and they keep you updated on where they're going to be each month. They have different, he has specialties each week. You have a running that runs each week that pretty much stays constant, and then you have other seasonals or whatever that
pretty much, yeah,
that run in and out. So I do appreciate that. Also, a big shout out to Chad and Nichelle for being here today to help us with this recording. Chad is the owner of 4Runner Production. He developed it, thought it up, and put it into action. This episode is produced, mixed, and mastered by 4Runner Productions. For more great content, search 4Runner Productions on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and become a supporter by visiting 4runnerproductions.com. Let me back up. Visiting 4runnerproductions.locals.com. 4Runner Productions, telling the best stories ever told, capturing the soul of our society. Also, we've got some help that's coming along the way. Couldn't be here today. I'm going to keep that secret until we actually get him out here and get him started. But we're very excited about having some help come on board. And also, I want to give a quick shout out to Chase Sizemore. Chase does all of our video editing, mixing, that sort of thing. And we send him some stuff sometimes that I don't know how he's able to pull out what he does. But Chase, we just want to give you a quick shout out, buddy. You're behind the scenes. You're hardly ever on the camera. Just want to give you a big thank you, and we really appreciate what you do. Jason, welcome, baby.
Thanks for having me today.
Man, it's been forever since I've been back in the shelter. Oh, by the way, before we get started, I just want to give everybody a quick update. This was Chad's side of the studio. Fortitude is actually that way on the other side of this room. But what I found out, because I actually started the Shelter Hole while I was off with my knee surgery, and it was cool. What I failed to realize, man, is it is hard to cool a 3-car garage with one of them little air conditioner things like you've got in your truck. I'm like, man, so I wasn't able to shoot. And then it gets so cold out there that you really don't want to be there either. I mean, I've got heaters. I was able to make that work. We hung curtain up. But anyway, we're in a development stage. This is just kind of temporary till I can get everything set up. But you are now, Jason's the first. You were the first in Fortitude. Now you're the first in the new Shelter Hole, man. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so the reason why I had Jason come back in his Fortitude episode, we basically stayed focused on the Cremoso Cheesecake, your truck, your experience, the business side of things. But Chad and I we felt like we did a disservice to your upbringing because we didn't allow the time we felt that was needed for you to actually go into, because you said you really didn't know how deep to go into your childhood. So I'm going to sit back and we'll kind of interject a little bit, but we're here to hear Jason's story because Jason was adopted as an infant. He was born in Texas, adopted as an infant by missionaries, and was raised in Africa. And so, Jason, man, we're excited to hear your story. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, it started at a very early age. Like you said, I was born in Texas. My earliest memories of the U.S. don't begin until I was about 9 years old. So my dad was a preacher. So when I was born, when I was adopted, he was preaching in a little church in Sour Lake, Texas. I don't remember that growing up at all. I only remember it later on when we had come back to the U.S. and visited down there. 4 years old. 1974, they moved to Zambia, Africa, and so at the age of 4, we were in a little town called Chingola. It was in the copper belt of Zambia, and the only kids I knew was the worker that we had working for us, his kids. So I played with them. They didn't speak any English. I didn't speak anything else at the time, so I learned very quickly the language Bemba. So while my parents were going through language school, I was already speaking the language. So they would come home, I would help them with their language studies at 4 years old. So I became fluent in about 6 languages total, including English. So I speak Bemba, Chinyanja, Lala. Spoke French, learned Spanish, and English. So multilingual growing up, and it was one of those, I had an accent growing up. My sister still talks about me having sound like a redneck. But I have people here that'll ask me where I'm from. Where are you from up north? And which is odd because I still think I sound like a redneck. Have that southern accent to me. But I do know growing up, I speak very proper English, more or less. So those, I think, are the words people hear thinking I'm from up north. But so I think 5 years old, we moved out to a 2,600 acre farm in Zambia, in the town of Sirinji. So once you got off the paved road, it took about 30 minutes to get to the house. Maybe not quite that long, but when I was a kid, it seemed like it took forever. First house we lived in on the farm was built by the Moffats, who were owners of the farm at the time. Then it got turned over to the Southern Baptist Mission. And there was another missionary couple there that lived there and operated the farm. My dad was primarily a church planner and developer.
So, Jason, that farm, you talked about that a little bit in the Fortitude podcast. The farm that you all had, did you all sell any of that, or was that just to support your family, or how many families did that support? How many people were involved in working there?
So the farm actually didn't support any of the families. It just supported the farm. And it was, any money raised was, used to develop churches and buy materials, stuff like that. So on the farm, we grew corn or maize. We had tomatoes and cabbage and anything you can think of. It all went to market and got sold. We had cows for milking for personal use, and we raised oxen and trained them to pull wagons and plows, and those got sold off to some of the villagers that had the money. They pulled together and to help raise and plant crops there for them. We had chickens and sold eggs and name it, we had it. Fruit, vegetables. So that's how I grew up. First stove we had was a small wood stove. That's what we cooked on when I was 5 years old. Then we built another house and, of course, had another wood stove, much bigger wood stove. But that was, growing up, was wood stove, no power, other than we had big generators we ran mostly at night. During the day, they were shut off unless we ground the maize and made cornmeal. So the the national food in Zambia is called nshima, which is like a very, very thick grits, but it's not it's more like cornmeal, so it's real fine. So that is their main staple of food is nshima. And they'll have, different, either greens or chicken or meat or beans, that's the main staple. So we made that, and everybody brought their corn, and we'd grind it. So if the generator was running for that, we had power. The water we used was from the river, so it got boiled. But as growing up, I was never at home, so if I got thirsty, I drank out of the stream. I had stomach issues for a while, got taken to the doctor. Doctor said, well, he'll either quit drinking the water or he'll become immune to it. Well, I became immune to it. So growing up, if I wasn't in school, I got up in the morning and I was gone. So I was on the farm. The other missionary family, their children were older than me and younger than me. So I grew up with the locals. If they ate it, I ate it. So there's not very much I didn't eat that... No, some other people would not eat for sure. That's, but I grew up and it was just normal for me. I didn't know anything any different because I was, we'd go out, so on the farm we had a soccer team. It was the farm soccer team. So we would go to different villages and play the village soccer team, and they would always ask, who's the white guy? And the guys, my friends, they would look around going, what white guy? Oh, him. Oh, no, he's one of us. And so, they played barefooted. I played barefooted, so that's just how I grew up. Learned to drive a tractor. I'm 9 years old, can drive. Pulled a tractor around with a trailer, hauling sand or stuff like that. We made our own brick on the farm. The locals helped us make brick, and they fired the brick to build our second house that we lived in. So it's just... Now, your farm,
when we think of Africa here, I mean, there's portions of Africa that's absolutely drop dead green and gorgeous. But when a lot of what we see, National Geographic or whatever, it's the desert, it's the jungle, it's dry, where, and maybe, Chad, we can get Chase to maybe pull up a picture and maybe show people while we're talking on the podcast that we can show where that's located. But how was the rainfall there? I mean, how did you all irrigate your crops, or was that an issue?
Irrigation wasn't really an issue. So Zambia is south central part of Africa. Used to be Northern Rhodesia. Then it gained its independence and became Zambia. So most of the irrigation we used came from the river. We had a irrigation ditch dug, and that's where the water that we drank came from.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's why you were having trouble with the water.
Yeah.
When you first got there.
So.
But he'll stop drinking it, or he'll get immune to it.
So when you're in the middle of nowhere and you're thirsty, you got to have a drink. So.
Well, that's like today. Whenever I was a kid growing up, we always drank out of the water hose. You hear it today, don't drink out of the water hose, you'll get a disease and die. Like,
yeah. So 2,600 acre farm. I gone all day playing. We had so the workers that worked we had I want to say it was like a truck rim or something. That was the starting whistle and the get off whistle, so the sound carried for a long way. So when they got off work, it was the gong, and everybody knew it's time to go home. So kind of knew that was when I needed to head home too. So if I was out playing, I could hear it. Sometimes didn't hear it. Mom used to have like a referee's whistle, and she'd blow it a couple times, but they never had to worry about me because I ate what everybody else ate. I drank what they drank, and so they didn't have to worry about me.
When you say you ate what they ate, I mean, what differently? Give us an example of what made
So, around here in North Carolina, everybody puts out the rings around the trees to keep the caterpillars from getting up in the tree. And usually those are the green ones you see with. So I eat those or ate those. So in Zambia we have flying ants. It's similar to what we consider here a termite, a little bit bigger, but instead of eating wood, they are in the dirt. And so there's a flying ants, kind of like an army ant size. I eat those.
That's interesting.
Baby bees in the honeycomb, the larva.
Yeah.
I've eaten that.
But you didn't know any different because you were raised there amongst all that, so you didn't know any different.
For me, it was normal. I mean, it really and truly was normal. I would bring home, hey, Mom, can you cook this for me? And she's like, I don't know how. Why not? So that was growing up normal. Right. So coming to the U.S., like we'd come home and there was a vending machine. You could get a Coke out of a vending machine. It was like, huh? What is this? It was so. Those were shocking things, to come back to the U.S. Every couple of years. We'd come back about every 4 years. So a lot changed in the U.S. There, things stayed the same. So, like I said, the first house we were in had an outhouse built in it. Well, not in it, but out back was an outhouse. That was seeing outhouses was normal. No running. We had running water, but nobody else did. So that was normal to see that. Growing up with a freezer full of food, frozen, so that was normal. Coming here and you just go to the grocery store and buy it. So my mother made everything from scratch. So that was normal for me. So to have her come back here and she's not used to even self-rising flour, that was new for her, So when they retired, me being here cooking, so I've learned, hey, you don't have to go buy that. You can buy this, and it saves you some time. But
so I have a question for you. So you had an adjustment to the water over there. Now, and you just sat here and said you all make everything. You butchered your own beef. You grew your own vegetables. So when you all would come back to the States periodically, McDonald's, Burger King, Highway 55, whoever, and all these processed foods, did your all system have trouble with that when you come here, or was it not really a big deal?
I don't remember. I don't think it was ever a big deal. I remember. I liked Chicken McNuggets. That was when Chicken McNuggets first came out, and I loved them, so we had to eat Chicken McNuggets. And donuts was a big deal. That was our one of our Saturday morning deals was go get donuts for breakfast.
So what did you all do for dessert over there? Was it, or did you really know dessert over there? Was it a big thing, or was it common or uncommon?
Dessert was more of a special time, specialty thing. It wasn't an everyday thing. Mom made brownies and cake and things like that, but we made homemade ice cream, and that was a hand crank ice cream. And I remember sitting on the churn so it'd hold it down so it could get it thick. I mean, it was things like that. So we. Like I said, we had our heat for water. We had a Rhodesian. It was called a Rhodesian boiler, and it was made with 55-gallon drums. So I mean, I don't know who knew how to do that, but I remember that. And over time, I remember we had a leak. I fixed it with Play-Doh.
Really?
Yeah. Don't ask me how I figured that one out, but a 55-gallon drum, when you start heating them up and they're in the fire, they get really brittle over time, and just sprung a leak, a little pinhole leak. I stuck some Play-Doh on there and it lasted, so. But yeah, so
Hey, Plato, if you want to sponsor us.
But yeah, so growing up for me, what I knew as normal wasn't normal. You know, not everybody grew up that way. And, you know, like I would, 78, 79, I was in the third grade. We were here and living in Dallas, Texas, in a missionary residence. But I was already used to going and doing, so it was hard to stay kind of in my yard. Luckily, we were beside the church, and they had a big parking lot, so I used to be able to ride my bicycle in a big parking lot. But I rode my bicycle to school. But it was different, you know. I grew up playing soccer. I actually quit playing about 6, 7 years ago. Just food truck business took off, and so I quit playing soccer. But soccer has been the sport that I know and have played since I was 4 years old. You know, 5 years old, we played soccer. So 3 sticks made a soccer goal.
So now the kids that you played, because you were homeschooled over there, right?
Homeschooled until, when was it, 79, 80, something like that.
So it was middle school, junior high?
Yeah, right. I think 5th grade, something like that.
I guess what I was wondering is, so the kids that you played with there, were kids you went to church with, or was it just local kids around you? Because you said your dad was a church planter over there.
So on the farm, we had a church, and it was the, you know, Caldwell Farm was the farm, and it was the farm church. And it was the Moffats had built the church as well when they were when they lived there, and so it was just, that's where we went to church mostly. There were times where we would go out. There was one of the churches, I remember, we had to have a 4-wheel drive to get to it. Just, it was about 3 hours away from the farm, and then it was an escarpment. You had to creep down to creep back up it. But we went to some churches when he would go out, you know, different times. But as we got older, we went to the farm church. Cool. So some of the locals around the area, my friends, you know, in particular, I sang in the choir in the church as a little kid.
So did you? I mean, the culture over there. How did you? I mean, is it just something that you learned through the kids that you hung out with? Was it their parents when you'd go to their house? Or, I mean, when you came back to the States, because it's two probably totally opposite cultures, you know, how did you react to that? I mean, were there struggles in adapting from one to the other? So
even to this day, there's things that I have to think about with the culture. So growing up there, you know, so I'm a missionary kid, parents are American, so I was the American, but then I leave the house, I became the Zambian, and so eventually those kind of merged together. And as a missionary kid, diplomat kids, military kids, a lot of times when you're stationed in another culture, and you're from another culture, you tend to form the third culture. And there's a community called third culture kids. And so it's just one of those. You take the culture you're born in, you take the culture you're raised in, and then you make it your culture, which blends the two together. And so there you become a third culture kid.
Wow. Yeah, Richie was there for a little while. I just find it very fascinating, because I know when we left here and went to Scotland, it was like going back in time 25 years. It was just totally, I mean, it was slow, laid back. And I told my dad, I said, you need to come over here just so you can go back in time. It's like a time warp. And we liked it. I mean, it was just different, and to be able to go and live in another culture, in another country, and to adapt to that and see how that operates was eye-opening. It's one thing to visit, like on vacation. you can go to the beach, you can go to Florida, you can go to Wyoming, California, wherever. You go there for a week and you think what you experience for that week is how things are there. Now, when you go, a lot of people say, well, I want to go live at the beach. Okay. You go down there and fight that traffic 9, 10 months out of the year. You know, you're just down there a couple of days fighting it. You do that every day when you're trying to go to work, go to the grocery store, take kids to school, go to the doctor, whatever. So for you to come back, and I was just curious to how it all meshed together when you came back.
It was a culture shock, really and truly. I mean, so growing up, we had no TV until maybe I was 14 years old. Our family didn't own a TV. When we moved from the farm into the capital of Lusaka, and my dad became a teacher at the seminary. One of the neighbors had a TV, one of the other missionary families, so they had a TV. TV came on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and went off at 11. There was one channel. So
that's like the way I was raised. We had 4 more than you did.
So that was TV for me until I left at 16 and came back to the U.S. You know, so TV was one channel. That was it. So there used to be cartoons come on in the afternoon. In the evenings, there might be an American TV show, The A-Team or something like that, when it was, but maybe 1 or 2 shows. And that was it, you know, to watch. So the rest of the time, like I said, I was out doing something.
There really wasn't enough there to keep your attention to get outside. There was more outside than there was inside.
So yeah, like I said, on the farm I had free reign. I went wherever, did whatever, you know, played, you know. And so I learned growing up a lot of survival kind of things, like you would go to school. Yeah, it was. I mean, I knew what to eat, where to find it. You know, get hungry, you're out in the woods playing. Oh, this tree has this fruit. You go eat it, you know, and get full. Grew up eating mangoes. We climbed the tree and eat mangoes till we got tired of eating. You know, so, I mean.
I had trouble there because I didn't like mangoes. I guess I got hungry enough to eat mangoes. I'm just not a big mango guy.
So we had, you know, guavas, you know, oranges, apples. You know, later on and right before we left the farm, the farm started growing coffee. So I got introduced to, still don't drink coffee, but I got introduced to the coffee side of some businesses, you know, the picking, the growing, the roasting, and the grinding, you know. So I kind of, you know, but I was still young, so I really didn't pay much attention. But I have that little bit of knowledge, you know, that not everybody does.
So when you left. So how old were you when you all left the farm and went to the city?
I left in, I want to say 80. I was in the 5th grade. I remember that.
So when you went to the city, I'm sure that had to be a little bit of a shock too, compared to where you were. But did you miss the country when you went there? Was there, you know, any times you wish you were back there? Or were you really happy you all went to the city? Or it's a little more modern?
I don't remember missing it. You know, I had a motorcycle, dirt bike. On the seminary it was large enough that I had built my own little motocross track, and so I you know, did that. I still kind of went and did whatever I wanted to. I rode a bicycle, you know, everywhere. But I spoke the language still. So parents didn't worry about me so much either, just because I could speak. And I remember one time answering the telephone, the man wanted to speak to my father, and I didn't understand his English. So I just automatically, without thinking about it, I switched and I spoke to him in the language. And so when my father got to the phone, they asked him, who who answered the phone? My dad said, "Oh, that was my son." They go, "No, that wasn't a white man." So I spoke the language with the national accent, sort of.
Wow.
So, if I was speaking on the phone, you couldn't tell I was white. And so my parents never really had to worry so much about me as far as getting lost or not being able to figure out something or ask for things. So
that's awesome. So when you were in the country, were there animals that you all had to be careful about? I mean, was there things that attacked your herd, or how did all that play together?
So we've had lions come across the farm. We actually had a hippo come down the river, get into the corn crop. But as far as the wildlife getting, not so much. I mean, snakes obviously everywhere. It's much like here in the U.S. You live in the mountains, there you might see a black bear, but it's not an everyday occurrence. Right. They kind of tend to stay away from modern stuff. So
they're like anything else. They're as afraid of us in a way as we are then, and they'd rather avoid any confrontation. I mean, if you corner somebody, if they've got babes, cubs or whatever, yeah. Were hyenas or coyotes or anything like that a problem?
No coyotes. Most of the wildlife in Zambia and much of Africa is, so we have game reserves, kind of much like the national parks in the U.S. So they're kind of protected areas, and so most of the animals tend to congregate there, but they're still it's wildlife,
right.
So they kind of go wherever, So. But I don't ever remember anything getting any of the animals on the farm.
What about snakes? Cobras were big over there. Are still big. I mean, that's one of the...
Most every snake in Africa is poisonous. So if you saw a snake, you killed it.
Not like a black snake. Okay, you're a good guy. I'm gonna let you
yeah, so most every snake is a poisonous snake, so you killed them when you saw them. So
that's awesome. So when you... So how long did you all live there in the city? I want to back up a little bit. So how old were your mom and dad, your adopted mom and dad, or I'm going to call them your mom and dad. How old were they when they adopted you, and how long had they been on the mission field?
So they did not go into the mission field until 1974. At that time, I was 4 years old.
Oh, so they were actually living in Texas whenever they adopted you.
Yes, and my dad preached, went to seminary. At one point, he was a bookmobile operator.
Cool, that's awesome. I remember that when I was a kid.
But so in 1974, they went to the missionary field. Don't ask me how old they are. I'm terrible with ages.
No. I didn't know
my dad.
Young.
No, they were. So my dad's fixing to turn 80. So they were in their, I would say, late 20s, early 30s, when I was adopted.
So when did your sister come on the scene?
So my sister is 4 years younger than me, or right at it. So just before we went to the missionary field, she was adopted. So
was she an infant as well when she was adopted?
I have one memory, and I remember being at the hospital, waiting for them to give her to us, and I was peeking through the door, and that's the one memory I have, and and then it was off to Africa, kind of, and that's where my memories pick back up. So it's just one of those little memories, glimpses that I can remember.
So the farm that you all lived on, how far was it away from the city, or the clearest, the closest, what we would call normal civilization, or?
So the closest town was
there we go, closest town.
about an hour from the farm, and it consisted of really and truly the corner food line with a little strip mall could serve as the town.
And you're not getting on 485 driving there.
No. So, and that's one of the things I remember, growing up in Africa is, there was one road. One road went west, one road went north, one road went south. So there was no going from the farm to the southern province through the country. You basically had to drive all the way into the capital and then take the road that went south. So,
and it wasn't just vehicles on the road either, right? I mean, you could have had people walking, cars, bikes, motorcycles, horses.
Not so much. That was one of the things. The horses were not so much people used, other than more of the expectorates. They had horses, so not a lot of locals had horses. So it's not, like you'd go in Amish country and see the Amish and buggies, going around. It was more, if they had any animals, it was cows.
Wow.
So.
So when did you? So you were in the cities there in Africa. So how long were you all there before you came back to the States?
So I actually left in 1986. My parents continued to be missionaries, and they stayed there until probably, it's been about 15 years ago now that they actually retired. So I came back to the U.S. and so I was going to the International School of Lusaka. So we called it ISL for short. And most of the missionary kids had gone there, but it was an English system. Getting teachers at the time when I left got very hard. So the quality of teachers and the education was declining rapidly. And so that was one of the reasons I left. The year before, I had chose to stay at ISL instead of going to the boarding school that all the missionary kids had been going to, which was RVA, which was in Kenya, a Rift Valley Academy. So then the next year when I needed to go there wasn't a place for me. So they were full. So I ended up coming to the U.S. and I went to Fork Union Military Academy in Fork Union, Virginia. Don't blink, you might miss it. But it was, we had visited there. Their main thing was, it was a one subject system. And so one subject for 6 weeks and then you were done with math, and then you moved on to English. So it helped you get the grades you needed, but it was also hard to retain the knowledge, because this year might be the very beginning of the year you take math. The next year it might be at the very end of the year. So you had a full year to forget everything.
Yeah, that'd be done.
But so it was good. I mean, I still fold clothes the same way,
Oh, I do too from boot camp.
It gets in there and it stays there, so, but, growing up, it's different, for me. Not normal. Happened to one of the missionary kids. So South Africa was much like the U.S., and so we used to travel there, buy vehicles there, transport them back. Met a missionary kid, missionary family there. He just happened to have the same birthday as me, same age. We ended up both of us ended up at Fork Union Military Academy. Didn't know either one was going to be there. We just happened to pass each other on campus one day. Talk about a shock.
Whoa, what are you doing here?
Yeah. But while I was there, for me growing up like I did, not knowing anybody in Virginia, I had the ability, permission, I should say, not the ability, but I could go home with whoever I wanted to. So one of my friends, he's a truck driver today, Joe Baker, and his family, they're African American. But I went home with him, and we went to church one Sunday, and his mom, apologized to me after church. I'm thinking, why? You know, and she said, I'm sorry. I hope you weren't uncomfortable being there. What do you mean? Well, you were the only white guy. I was? So that was, from growing up, that was normal. You know, it was not something I saw as being different. So being the only white guy in church was normal.
You didn't see it all.
So yeah, so it was different coming here sometimes, and going home with different people, seeing different things that I didn't see or was exposed to growing up.
What you had come to know as normal? Wasn't normal anymore.
Yes, very. It was a lot of different things.
You go to somebody's house, you're going to do what? You're going to watch what? Yeah, I can only imagine. So, you speak 5 different languages?
Now it's less than that.
So, did you learn that on the mission field when you were in college?
So,
Military school?
no. So, growing up, I learned Bimba Nyanja and Lala, just local dialects, just being in it. When I got to ISL, I had to take a language. I had the choice of German or French, and so I chose French. But in the English system, you start learning a language early on. So in grade school, you started learning French. And so by the time I got to my 11th grade year of school, I'd already had 5 years of French. So when I got to Fork Union, they asked me, well, what language do you want to take? And I said, well, I've been taking French. I'll take French. Okay. And so got to talking. How many people's going to be in class? Oh, just you. How come? Well, you've already had 5 years of French. Everybody else is just starting. Okay, I'll take Spanish. So I took Spanish for 2 years. I don't really remember a whole lot of it till after I got out of school. I got into building golf courses. There was a company I worked for, and they were out of Georgia, and so we did a lot of different jobs. But one of them, building golf courses, had a lot of Hispanic guys come in, and some of them wanted to learn English more, and so I learned Spanish more. So we just taught each other different things, and so I learned Spanish plus the years I had in school. I picked up Spanish very well, and just, already being multilingual, languages came easy for me.
So when you were, now did you go to college?
I did.
You took some
briefly,
college.
yeah.
Now during all this time, you're still playing soccer, correct?
Correct.
And so you traveled. Was it like a semi-pro team, or?
So this was it was a club level soccer team. We played. We traveled all over the country playing, but this was in Texas at the time. So, the college I chose when I was at Fork Union didn't have a soccer team. It had a basketball team, so I actually had a walk-on scholarship playing basketball. So I actually played basketball with the team for a while, but still tried to play soccer. And got to traveling. Never liked school, so I ended up dropping out of college. I actually had Gardner Webb offered, scholarship. Had Wake Forest had offered me a scholarship, but for whatever reason, I went to Texas. Don't know why. I went to Texas, Beaumont, Texas, Lamar University, but briefly. So, but I, played soccer, played football in high school some, played in the 7th grade. I was good at it, but just didn't grow up with it, so it wasn't my first love sport. Soccer was, so I chose soccer.
So when you left the military academy, pick up there and take off.
So left 18 years old, just so happened, graduated. My parents were due for furlough, so they came 1998. They came back to the U.S. We settled in Beaumont, Texas, a little town actually in Silsbee, just outside of Beaumont. That's where the one college I applied to was in Beaumont, so that's where we chose to live that year. Kind of got away from college, playing soccer, traveling. During military school, I had gone home with another missionary family, gone to their house. Their son had been writing a girl as for a church something to do with church and GAs. And I got her address. I started writing her during military school just to have something to do and read. And so, long story short, how I got to North Carolina, she ended up getting pregnant. And so I moved to North Carolina. My parents actually went back to Zambia, and I moved to North Carolina. So
you've been here ever since.
Been here ever since. So
where did your gift for operating equipment come from? Did that come from back in your early years on the mission field at the farm, or is it just something you just come natural to?
It's really come natural, I guess. I do a lot of art. I used to do a lot of art, I should say. So I have a lot of hand-eye coordination. So picking up equipment, just like driving for me, I'll figure it out and I can do it. So from an early age, I was driving, operating a tractor, plowing, bush hogging,